Well, fat digestion is the one you're definitely going to want to write down and find a way to memorize. Okay. Now, this is a really good study slide, so that's why I have it here. But yeah, this is the one that is really easy to get things tumbled about in your head. So let's go over it a couple of times. We know that there is an enzyme in your saliva called lingual lipase. Lingual lipase is not active while you're chewing your food. However, while you're chewing your food, you're mixing the fat there with this enzyme. And then when you swallow that, and the enzyme gets to a pH of 2 or so down in the hydrochloric acid of the stomach, then that enzyme gets activated. And so while you are digesting your food, fat is getting enzymatically digested inside of the stomach. So for those of you keeping track, the digestion of carbohydrates starts in the mouth. Not much happens in the stomach, finishes pretty quickly in the duodenum. The digestion of protein starts in the stomach and finishes up in the duodenum. The digestion of fat starts in the stomach, and then it finishes up pretty much in the duodenum, small intestine. It takes a little longer to digest fat, but not for the same reasons as protein. So there's fat in your food, and it is going to, what's not on here, is it's going to be digested some by lingual lipase while it is in your stomach. Then it's going to move into the duodenum. Now, one of the interesting things, and we will come back to this in a later video, is that having fat in your food, when that gets squirted with the acid that's in it into the duodenum, then the duodenum is going to send out those hormones, right? We talked about the hormones released from the duodenum in an earlier video. Those hormones, some that we know and some we suspect exist that we haven't identified yet, those hormones are among the things that are going to tell you that you've been fed. I don't know if you've ever done this, like been super, super hungry, and all you had in your house was like apples to eat. And you could eat like a dozen apples when you're super hungry, and you feel a little better, your blood sugar will go back up, but you don't really feel satisfied. And part of that, we believe, is because of this link between acid, fat, and the duodenum. A little bit of fat mixed with acid, when it gets into the duodenum, it causes the duodenum to release the hormones that tell your brain, okay, you've been fed. The fact that sugary foods like Sour Patch Kids, for example, one of my favorites, the fact that those do not trigger the release of that hormone from the duodenum is one of the reasons why I could eat Sour Patch Kids all day and not feel like I had eaten any food. And it allows me to eat a tremendous number of calories and not really feel full. That's one of the reasons why the sugary foods that we eat, and particularly the sugary beverages that we drink, they really can add to the number of calories we eat in a day because they simply don't seem like food. And it's not just your perception of things, it's actually triggered, it's baked into the way fat is a key component of triggering the release of those hormones from the duodenum. So now fat has gotten through the stomach, and now it's in the duodenum. The first thing that's going to happen is that those bile salts that were made by the liver and concentrated in the gallbladder, those bile salts are going to emulsify the fat. And we already know what that means. Those big blobs of fat that are floating around in the water, they get dissolved into little tiny droplets of fat, and they're called emulsification droplets. And each one of these droplets is going to turn into a micelle after the pancreatic lipase, this enzyme, has digested all of the triglyceride that's in that emulsification droplet, right? So it stalls as emulsification droplet, that's still triglyceride, not ready to be absorbed. Pancreatic lipase acts on the fat that's inside those emulsification droplets, and now we have got ourselves a micelle. The micelles will get absorbed directly by the intestinal cells. The ingredients of a micelle and the coating of a micelle are such that they just kind of blend in with the cell membrane of those simple columnar epithelial cells, and boom, now the contents of the micelles are instantly inside of the simple columnar epithelial cells. So it is actually easier to absorb a micelle than it is to absorb an amino acid. Then, and I've got this bold and I've got it italicized, so I hope you'll remember it for the final exam, that those intestinal cells, simple columnar epithelial cells, they're going to take those fatty acids and the stuff from the micelles and they repackage it into something that is now called a chylomicron. A chylomicron. Chylomicrons are little packages of of fatty acids and monoglycerides and fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A and vitamin K inside of a little protein shell. I always envision kind of an M&M, right? It's got a little protein shell around it. Now it is a chylomicron. And then these chylomicrons are ready to go into the lacteals. And when 50, you memorize the lacteals. Inside of each villus, there is a capillary carrying blood. That blood's going to pick up amino acids and sugars and carry it to the liver. But in the center, there was that green tubule, and that green tubule is called a lacteal, and that is the beginning of a lymphatic capillary. These chylomicrons in their little protein shells, right, they're going to be put into the lacteals. And then the lacteals can slowly carry that fat stuff until it comes back up the thoracic duct and gets dropped into your left. Can't remember the name of the vein. Oh, heck. Okay. So, and then after that, it's going to go to the heart. Okay. So the liver gets first dibs on all the amino acids and the sugars. But that's not the direction that fat goes. Fat is going to go up through the lymphatic system, and then it gets dropped into a vein, and then it goes directly to the heart. It doesn't go through the liver first. So that means all of these fatty acids and monoglycerides that are inside of the chylomicron, they actually can get distributed directly to the cells before they ever get to the liver. All right? So make sure you find your own way of distinguishing that the micelles come first and the chylomicrons come second, right? Chylomicrons get made by the intestinal cells. All right, so we'll go over it again. Here we've got this big old fat globule. Why is fat in the form of a globule? Because it's hydrophobic. So whenever fat is in water, it tries to find other fat molecules and make these big globules. We will use the bile acids, bile salts, same things, and lecithin in order to make these emulsification droplets. So now we've got little tiny packages of fats. Remember that the pancreatic lipase, these proteins that are enzymes, they can only work at the interface of water. So we could have a certain number of proteins working their way in from here. That would take a long time. We can use many, many more proteins wrapped around each emulsification droplets and turn that emulsification droplet into a micelle super fast. Oh, what molecule are bile salts made from? The bile salts are made from cholesterol, right? They're steroids. All righty, so now we have got the emulsification droplet, and it is going to be acted on by pancreatic lipase. Pancreatic lipase will take these triglycerides and cut off a couple of the fatty acids, and we will end up with a monoglyceride plus 2 fatty acids. And all of this will be inside of the micelles, right? The micelles still have bile acids on the outside. Here's something that could be useful for your lab activity, that we don't just call these things fatty acids. Fatty acids literally are acids. So at this moment, if I took triglycerides and put them in water, the pH stays at 7. But if I've got this in water, pH of 7, and now I use pancreatic lipase would liberate fatty acids from there. And when the fatty acids get liberated, they're going to make the environment more acidic. So the reason that when you digest the triglycerides in milk or cream and the solution changes pH, it is because we are liberating the fatty acids that are there. So now we have got micelles, and the micelles are ready to go directly into the cells of the small intestine. Here we've got the micelles. They will go right past that brush border, and they just kind of blend right into the cell membrane. And now all the contents of the micelles are inside of these simple columnar epithelial cells. And the simpler columnar epithelial cell is going to repackage them into chylomicrons. The chylomicrons have got a protein shell around them, kind of like an M&M. Chylomicrons are going to be put into the lacteals. They don't go into the capillaries, right? So that green tubule, the lacteal, it's got a different path to take. And that is why the fatty acids from fat digestion, as it goes back towards the heart, it is taking a different pathway. Great. So let's talk a little bit more about the digestive system. Let's talk about health. As a matter of fact, I'm going to talk about all these parts about health in a separate video.